My name is Jennifer Hayes, 35 years old, an interior designer from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who carved my own way. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone beeped with a text message from Mom that froze me in my tracks. "Don't call or come over, we're done." My heart plummeted, but I didn't whimper or plead. I typed out 2 words. Got it. That was all. All those years of giving my heart and my money to my family, paying for Mom's medical expenses, bailing out my brother's debt, supporting their restaurant, down the drain in a text. I'd always been the odd one, the one who did design instead of their family business, the one who they never viewed as enough. But that message, it was a line in the sand. I wasn't going to pursue them. By midnight, my phone was ringing off the hook. Missed calls, voicemails, texts coming in, Mom's number flashing over and over, then my brother's, even Dad's. They were freaking out, and I could imagine why. I'd been their safety net for years, and now I was out. What came after turned everything that I believed about my family on its head. Stay tuned to find out how it all fell apart. If you've ever been pushed aside by family, give this video a like, leave a comment with your experience, and subscribe for the rest of this crazy ride. I grew up in Tulsa, and our family was the epitome of the American dream. My father owned a restaurant chain, a local legend who took a single diner and built it into a successful enterprise. Mom left a career in banking to stand by him, tending the house and polishing his rough edges. My 4-year younger brother, Brandon, was the golden child, the one they hoped would carry the family torch. Me. I was Jennifer Hayes, the square peg with fantasies of space and color, not menus and bottom lines. Early on, Dad let me know what he wanted. "The restaurants are our future," he'd announce at supper, his tone heavy with command. "You'll learn the business, Jennifer." I had no desire for grease-soiled aprons or juggling ledgers. I dreamed of designing home interiors, environments in which people came alive. By the time I was in high school, I was drawing floor plans and notebooks, envisioning modern offices and comfortable living rooms. When I mentioned to Dad that I planned to major in interior design, he laughed. "That's a hobby, not a profession." His tone was firm enough to sever. Mom remained silent, her eyes avoiding mine, already taking sides. I applied to a leading art school in Chicago at 17. The letter of acceptance arrived, and I was on cloud 9. But Dad's response devastated me. "If you're not going into the restaurants, you're on your own," he intoned, arms folded. "No tuition, no assistance." Mom nodded along, her silence louder than words. Brandon, just 13, snickered, as if he'd just won a prize. I felt like a stranger in my own home, their preference for him already building a rift. I worked 2 jobs, waitressing and tutoring, to supplement what scholarships didn't. Late nights, endless shifts, and a mound of student loans carried me through. Dad never questioned how I made it, and Mom's sporadic, "I'm proud of you," rang hollow when she'd turn around and fawn over Brandon's half-hearted efforts at assisting in the restaurants. He could do no wrong, even when he missed classes or messed up orders. I recall that one Christmas I was home from school. Brandon left one of the restaurants open, and a burglary ran into the thousands. Dad just laughed it off. "He's learning," he said, as I received a lecture for skipping a family dinner to complete a design assignment. The gap increased. Dad's attention was always on Brandon, the son who would inherit the empire regardless of how much he didn't care. Mom echoed Dad, her affection saved for him. I tried to spend more time with her, calling on weekends, showing her my drawings, but her answers were brief, absent-minded. "Brandon's working at the restaurant," she'd say, as if it was something to be proud of. I needed to yell, "What about me?" But I held it in, hoping someday they would recognize my value. By graduation, the gap was irrefutable. I'd established myself in Tulsa, working on boutique hotels and high-end residences. But on dinner parties, it was all about the restaurants. "When are you joining us?" Dad would ask, as if my career were non-existent. Brandon would interject, mocking my nice pictures, and Mom would smile, never defending me. Their favoritism wasn't something that I felt. It was a wall, and I was on the wrong side of it. Now looking back, those years became the foundation for everything else. I continued to try to impress them in an effort to find a place in their world, but the more I pushed, the more it became obvious. They'd picked Brandon, and I was merely the backup plan that they didn't need.
Following art school, I dove headfirst into developing my career as an interior designer. Chicago had schooled me to dream big, turning rooms into stories, not mere rooms. In Tulsa, I became small, reimagining neighborhood cafes, transforming cramped diners into cozy havens. My first professional break came at 27, when a boutique hotel chain commissioned me to reimagine their lobbies in Oklahoma. Clean lines, warm textures, and an infusion of modern elegance, my spaces turned heads. Before long, private residences and high-end restaurants were knocking, and my name, Jennifer Hayes, was being seen in local design blogs. At 30, I was signing contracts for six figures, established as Tulsa's premier designer for high-end spaces. But at home, it was another matter. 5 years ago, Mom got severely ill. The docs weren't beating around the bush. Her care would run tens of thousands, possibly more. Dad's restaurants were doing poorly, and insurance only paid for essentials. I didn't wait. I sent money for her hospital charges, for specialist consultations and medicine. "We'll reimburse you," Dad told me on the phone, his tone curt, but I knew not to hope. Mom texted, "Thanks, Jennifer," but nothing else. No phone calls, no actual thanks. It hurt, but I reminded myself it was for her well-being, not their acceptance. And then there was Brandon. My younger brother, still in his 20s, had begun a side business, a food truck business that crashed in months. He'd accumulated debts, charged up credit cards, and wasn't able to pay his portion of the family restaurant bills. Dad called me one night, his voice all business. "Brandon needs assistance." He spoke as if it was my responsibility to correct it. I wired him the money, $30,000 to pay off his debts, and another $20,000 to sustain the restaurants. Brandon never even offered thanks. Instead, at a family barbecue party, he spoke of how he turned things around by himself, as if my money had not rescued him. Dad patted him on the back, beaming, while I stood there, unseen. I continued giving. When one of the restaurants needed to invest in some new equipment, a walk-in fridge that was ridiculously expensive, I paid for it. When Mom's treatment needed to consult with a specialist in Dallas, I paid for the travel and consult. Every time, I hoped that they'd see me, really see me, not as a checkbook. At family dinners, though, the conversation was always about the restaurants, Brandon's potential or expansion plans from Dad. My contribution, hardly a mention. After I presented a magazine spread on my hotel designs, hoping Mom would be pleased, she scanned it and said, "That's nice, but Brandon's working so hard at the restaurant." I smiled stiffly, heart constricted with disappointment. The pattern wore me down. I'd call my mom to see how she's doing, expecting some actual conversation, but she'd turn to Brandon's new scheme or Dad's anxiety. Dad never inquired about my work, only phoning when they needed money. "The restaurant's short for the month," he'd tell me, and I'd wire the money, wishing I was an ATM and not his daughter. Brandon, on the other hand, was arrogant, like my success was my family's due. "You're doing well, so why not help out?" he said once, casual, like my years of grinding meant nothing. In retrospect, I realize how foolish I was believing that money could bring their respect. Every check I wrote, every bill I paid was an attempt to close the chasm that they'd created. But they took everything, hundreds of thousands over the years, and returned nothing, not even a nod of recognition. The pain accumulated, silent but heavy, and I began to question whether or not I'd ever be enough for them. 5 years into my career, I pitched a bold idea to my family. My interior design business was thriving, and I'd been dreaming of a new venture, a sustainable design firm focused on eco-friendly materials for hotels and restaurants. It wasn't just a passion project, it was a business plan backed by market research showing demand for green design in Tulsa's growing hospitality scene. I had capital to expand, and for the first time, considered my family might view my dream as something other than a hobby. I put together a presentation with budget details and estimated returns and asked them to attend a meeting in our family home. I stood in the dining room, my open laptop, slides ready. Dad sat at the table's head, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Mom sat close, putting out the coffee, not looking at me. Brandon sat slumped in his chair, swiping on his phone, hardly acknowledging me. His wife, Tara Hayes, sat patiently next to him, giving me a little smile. I breathed deeply and began to explain how using sustainable materials would save money in the long run and draw environmentally friendly clients. This could make Tulsa a player, I told her, my voice firm despite the anxiety. I'm requesting an investment of $200,000. I'll repay it with interest. Dad didn't let me get out a word. Pipe dream, he cut me off, leaning in. You think hotels care about reclaimed wood? They want cheap, not elaborate experiments. His words stung like a slap, but I continued displaying evidence of client demand. Brandon snorted, not even looking up. Sounds like a money waste. Why don't you mind keeping to house decorating? I squeezed my fists under the table, my face hot with anger. I'd been planning this for months, and they were casting it aside without even looking at it. Mom remained quiet, refolding napkins, her method of avoiding confrontation. I looked over at her, hoping for a pinch of encouragement. Mom, you've seen what I've done. You know I can do this. She flinched, then spoke softly. It sounds dangerous, Jennifer. The restaurants are familiar. Her words cut harder than Dad's. I'd kept their business solvent, paid for her treatments, and still I was the interloper? Tara raised her voice softly but distinctly. I believe it's innovative, she told him, casting a nervous glance at Brandon. Sustainability's a huge buzzword these days. For an instant, I felt a flutter of hope, but Brandon gave her a stern look and she backed down, saying nothing further. Dad gestured with his hand, ending the debate. We're not pouring money into this, he declared. Brandon's setting up a new restaurant location. That's our priority. Brandon grinned as if he'd beaten me out in some competition I didn't realize I was participating in. I made one final attempt. This is not a handout, I said, my voice increasing. This is an investment with dividends. I've worked my entire career from scratch. You know I'll pay it back. Dad shook his head. You made your choice, Jennifer. The family business is paramount. Brandon chimed in. Perhaps if you assisted the restaurants, we'd consider you seriously. I felt like screaming. I'd given them hundreds of thousands, bailed them out again and again, and they still regarded me as a kid with a sketchbook? The room seemed smaller, the air heavy with their disregard. I packed up my laptop, my hands trembling. Tara saw me go by, mouthing, I'm sorry, but nothing was of use. On the drive home, I replayed their words, each statement reminding me that I'd never be sufficient. Dad's attention was always on Brandon. Brandon, regardless of how often I demonstrated. Mom's silence was just as terrible, her allegiance bound to Dad's dream. Even Tara, who believed in the potential of my venture, couldn't stand against them. That evening, I was alone in my apartment gazing at my business plan. I'd given it everything, the way I'd given everything to my family. But their rejection wasn't about money. It was about me. They didn't think I was good enough. And that stung worse than I could accept. I didn't know it then, but that meeting marked the end. One night, after dinner at my in-laws, I heard something I shouldn't have. The dishes were washed, and I had slipped into the kitchen to grab my coat, thinking of going home. Tara stood near the sink, twisting a dish towel in her hands. She looked around the room, then pulled me aside, her voice hardly louder than a breath. Jennifer, I have to tell you something, she said, her eyes flashing toward the dining room where Dad and Brandon were conversing. Brandon's been stealing money from the restaurants. Thousands. It's why they're failing. My stomach fell. I knew the restaurants were in trouble, but I had no idea. I thought it was bad business. He's been cooking the books for years, Tara continued, her voice trembling. I discovered receipts and secret accounts. He's lying to your parents. I stood there, stunned, repeating her words to myself. Tara was white-faced, as if she'd just committed adultery with her own husband. Before I could answer, I heard Dad's voice escalate from the next room. I moved in closer, hiding behind the doorway. He was speaking to Mom, their voices low but aggressive. We need to sign off on the will. Dad's voice was firm. Brandon's the only one holding this family together. Jennifer's doing her own thing. She doesn't care about us. My heart was racing. Mom muttered something I couldn't quite hear. Then she said, She's done so much for us, Stephen. Dad interrupted her. Money, not devotion. Brandon's our legacy. We'll leave the restaurants to him. I felt the room had been drained of air. They were shutting me out, obliterating me from their future after all I'd sacrificed. I slid out the back door, my brain whirling. All those years covering Mom's medical bills, bailing Brandon out, rescuing their restaurants, and they thought I was being disloyal? I drove home dazed, reliving Tara's admission and Dad's words. Brandon's theft accounted for the ever-present cash shortfalls, the delayed vendor payments I'd underwritten, and yet they were rewarding him, not me. The betrayals seared, but I wasn't ready to deal with them. Not yet. The next morning, my phone vibrated with a text from Mom. "Don't call or stop by. We're done." The words were a punch. I gazed at the screen, my hands shaking. This wasn't about the will. It was personal. Mom, the one I'd always been closest to, was shutting me out. I responded with, "Got it," and sent the message before I could think better of it. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I didn't. No more running after them, no more begging. If they wanted rid of me, I'd give it to them. I opened my banking app and terminated every recurring payment I'd arranged for them. Mom's medical bills, null and void. Brandon's debt repayments ceased. The utility bills for the restaurant, no longer my concern. I'd invested more than $300,000 propping them up, hundreds of hours worth of work to pay for their existence, and they'd spit it back at me. It felt like a relief to cut those bonds, but it stung. I wasn't just cutting off money, I was also giving up on the belief that they would ever acknowledge me. As I sat there looking at the confirmation messages for the failed transactions, I couldn't help but feel a combination of relief and anger. Tara's words rang in my mind. Brandon's theft concealed for years. How long had they been aware? Had Mom and Dad helped him out? Or were they ignorant? Either way, their decision to side with him and not me was apparent. I considered calling Tara, requesting more information, but I didn't. She had risked telling me, and I had no idea where her loyalties were. I spent the evening lying awake. The message from Mom seared into my brain. We're done. It wasn't an SMS. It was a proclamation. They'd made their choice, and I wasn't part of it. But I wasn't that same girl who'd pleaded for their acceptance. I'd constructed my world without them, and now I'd defend it. Their treachery had ignited a fire within me, and I wasn't going to let it destroy me. My phone was a tempest of alerts by midnight. Missed calls, voicemails, messages. Mom's number flashed first, followed by Brandon's, then Dad's. They figured out I'd cut them off for funds, or so they thought. I didn't pick up. I sat on my couch and watched, just watched the screen. Each buzz squeezing the knot in my chest tighter. For years I'd been their safety net, and I'd cut the wires, the umbilical, whatever, and they were now fraying. Brandon's initial voicemail was toxic. "You think you can just leave, Jennifer?" he spat. "You're being selfish, leaving us in the lurch like this." Selfish? I had come close to laughing. I had paid off his debts, supported the restaurants, and he dared to say I was selfish? His next message was worse. "You'll be sorry about this," he said, speaking quietly. "Sure, we'll take legal action if need be." I crusted out, my hand firm but my heart pounding. Legal action? For what? Rescuing them from his years of mess. Mom's text followed, a barrage of guilt trips. "How could you do that to me, Jennifer?" Reading, "After all I've been through, you're leaving your own mother." Another, "I taught you better than this." I glared at those words, her attempt to twist the knife. She'd always been good at tugging on my heartstrings, reminding me of the late-night conversations we used to have, the ones I believed held meaning. But now it was manipulative, not love. I didn't respond. I wouldn't let her words pull me back in. Dad called at 1 a.m. I allowed it to go to voicemail, his booming voice coming through the speaker. "Jennifer, you need to correct this." He told me like I was a worker who had messed up an order. "The restaurants can't last without your assistance. You owe us that much." Oh, them? I'd sacrificed more than $300,000, years of my life, and they'd excluded me from their will, discarded my career, opted for Brandon even if he lied to me. I kept the voicemail, not because I felt guilty, but so I'd remember who they were. Through the morning, the calls continued. Brandon sent a text. "You're destroying this family. This is your fault." I could imagine him pacing, blaming all parties but himself for the trouble he'd gotten himself into. Tara called once but didn't leave a message. I wondered if she felt trapped in the middle, knowing what Brandon had done but too afraid to stand up again. Mom's second voicemail was more gentle, bordering on desperate. She said, "Jennifer, please, we're family. You can't turn your back on us." I'd like to have believed she was serious, but her text message, "We're done," still seared in my brain. Family didn't give you the dump like that.
Dad's second call was later that afternoon. I answered hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd come to admit they were wrong. Instead, he came at me. "You're jeopardizing your mother's health," he said. "Treatments of hers don't come cheap, and the restaurants are hemorrhaging. You have to step up." Not one word about the Will Brandon's theft or their treachery. I clasped the phone, my tone steady but icy. "I've stepped up for years, Dad. I'm finished." He hesitated, then spoke. "You'll change your mind when you see what this does to us." I hung up, my determination growing tougher. The barrage didn't cease. Brandon's following message would reveal me, whatever that entailed. "Everyone will see how you betrayed us," he typed. I rolled my eyes. Betrayed them? After years of carrying their load. Mom sent a text reminiscing about my childhood. "Remember when I assisted you in creating your first drawings?" she wrote. "I've always been there for you." She had not. Not when I needed her to defend me, not when they laughed at my aspirations. I remained quiet for all of it. Every message, every call was a last-ditch effort to drag me back to their mess. But I understood it now. They didn't want me, only my money. I looked at my bank account where the canceled payments were confirmed. No more funding Mom's medical expenses, no more bailing out Brandon, no more rescuing Dad's restaurants. I'd fought for years to gain their respect, but respect wasn't what they gave me. It was control, and I was through offering it to them. By the end of the week, it had only intensified. Their threats, pleas, curses accumulated. But I never faltered. I'd made my decision, not in spite, but for survival. I wasn't their ATM any longer. I was Jennifer Hayes, and I'd had enough of being their backup plan. A week later, I saw them at a Tulsa cafe. I'd promised one final discussion, not to make peace, but to shut the door forever. The atmosphere was charged with tension as I entered, seeing Dad, Mom, and Brandon at a corner table. Tara was absent. She'd sent me a text of apology that she couldn't handle the repercussions. I sat, sitting up straight, my determination unbroken. I wasn't that same Jennifer who'd pleaded for their approval years before. I began with the facts. I sold my green design project, I told them, my voice firm. A national company purchased it for $1 million. Their eyes widened, but I didn't stop. "I created that from scratch, on my own, without your assistance, in spite of your skepticism." Dad's jaw clenched. Mom looked down and Brandon fidgeted uncomfortably. I leaned in. "I gave you all. Money, time I believe in. And you wasted it. Picked Brandon over me, even when he swiped from you." I didn't say Tara's name to guard her secret. The face of Brandon reddened. "You're not telling the truth." He lost it. "You're jealous, just trying to bring us down." I didn't blink. "The receipts don't lie, Brandon. I know what you did." Mom's hand jumped to her mouth, but she didn't say anything. Dad's tone was cutting. "You don't get to judge us," he growled. "You walked away from the family business." I snorted, a harsh laugh. "I walked away? You pushed me out, Dad. You cut me out of your will, told me I was disloyal." Mom attempted her old ploy, her voice gentle and cajoling. "Jennifer, we're your family. You can't just shut us out now." I met her gaze stone cold. "You shut us out first, Mom. That text, 'We're done,' was your doing." She winced, tears beginning, but I wasn't moved. "I'm finished being your safety net," I said. "I deserve respect, not playing games. If you can't offer that, we're through." Brandon mocked. "You think you're superior to us. You'll crawl back." I shook my head. "No, Brandon, I won't." I pushed my chair across the floor. "This is it," I said. "No more money, no more calls, no more opportunities." Dad's face turned hard. "You'll regret this, Jennifer," he said, repeating Brandon's threat from last week. I did not reply. I went out the cafe door, its swing slamming shut behind me, my heart laden but unencumbered. I did not glance back. A year after, I heard the repercussions through common friends. The family restaurants declared bankruptcy, cannot being sustained without my fundings. Brandon was in legal trouble. Vendors sued him when his secret accounts were revealed, showing years of thievery. Mom and Dad withdrew into a silent, introverted life, their name being dragged in the mud. Tara, I heard, had left Brandon, beginning anew elsewhere. I didn't get in touch. That was the end. I progressed, investing all my energy in my design business. Selling my project freed me to grow, building a team, working with clients from abroad. My life was not perfect, but it was mine, constructed on my terms, not theirs. I found solace in establishing limits, in prioritizing myself above a family who never prioritized me. The pain of their deception still resonated, but it no longer consumed me. In retrospect, I discovered something important. Respect begins with you. I wasted years attempting to win their love, believing I needed to be worthy, but no amount of sacrifice or money could alter the way they perceived me. Boundaries weren't selfish, they were survival. They taught me to respect my own value in order to leave behind those who do not. I hope whoever is listening to this story takes that to heart. Family is not a reason to suffer pain. It's a connection that should make you stand taller. If it does not, you owe it to yourself to break free. Thank you for riding with me through this ride. It wasn't easy to expose, but it's my reality. I'd love to hear your feedback. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family? Leave a comment down below and let's chat. Your experiences are important, and I appreciate each one of you who listened.